let's talk about number 3, in fact, on the Warchant Top 40. It's 6'6" wide receiver Deuce Robinson. And he's a kid that comes in at number 3 on Warchant's Top 40 list that I think, Tom, we are all very, very hopeful to see emerge as an elite player for the Noles and really in college football, because the tools, we talk a lot about recruiting. We talk a lot about where Florida State has whiffed, where Florida State has succeeded, where they need to get better. But to me, this was the guy in the offseason, getting him to come here, a former 5-star recruit, one of the highest-rated recruits in the country at the time that he committed to Southern Cal. It was a case in which another legacy got away initially, and we were all frustrated by that. But now he's where he belongs in our eyes here at Florida State. And again, you can't help but look at those measurables. At 6'6", 225 pounds, they're about fast for that size, a great athlete, a jumper, a guy who can really make plays. This has got to be a superstar. Florida State has to hope that Deuce Robinson emerges as a superstar on this team. He comes in at number 3 on our list. I thought he would either be 2 or 3. We can pull up and look at the graphic of who voted where. But, this is, Tom had it up already. I had him at 2. That's why I'm saying I thought he could be 2 or 3. It's because I had him at 2. But Tom, you had him at 5. Aslan had him at 7. Let me ask you if the reason for it is that this is a running offense.
That's a part of it, but also I went trenches to begin too. We all know who number 1 is probably going to be now. Obviously, by elimination purposes, you can guess it's likely going to be the quarterback. That's at number 1. But after that, I went trench player, skill position player. So Deuce Robinson is the first non-quarterback skill position player I have on the board, because I do think he has explosive playability. And even though this offense is run first, it generates downfield shots. Like, this is a receiver body type and skill set that is made for downfield shots off of play action or RPO looks. That's what Deuce Robinson is. So I'm not shorting him one bit. It's just I think that the left tackle, best defensive lineman, best edge rusher are a little bit more important for the team's success, because let's say that you take Deuce Robinson off the field for a given week. It doesn't help your cause, but it doesn't hurt as much as if your left tackle was gone or if your best edge rusher or your best defensive lineman were gone, I think, given the way that this offense is constructed. But that's to say nothing about the importance that Deuce Robinson is going to have overall. He's going to be extremely important. And he's a guy that I think is wired right for this moment, too. He is somebody that we've had the opportunity to speak to away from media settings because of the relationship that we have with his dad, Dominic Robinson. Deuce is unbelievably well adjusted in this era of NIL, look at me, social media. Dominic has raised quite a mature citizen, and I think he's ready for this moment. And he looks at it as, yes, an opportunity to play at the place that he grew up rooting for, that his dad played for. But Deuce is also looking at this as a business opportunity, and he's got the right mindset for it, I think, this year.
I think it's hugely important, but he is perfectly suited to launch into not only a starter's role, and remember, he's only started 5 games in 2 years. Now, he has been productive in the times that he has played. 23, he got to catch footballs from Caleb Williams, who ended up being the number 1 overall pick. He caught 16 passes for 351 yards and 2 touchdowns. Last season, 23 catches, nearly 400 yards and 5 touchdowns. So he's been productive. That's 39 receptions, 746 yards, and 7 touchdowns over 2 years. But again, 2 seasons, just 5 starts. So you're talking about a kid now who gets a chance to start every week and really look at a launching pad for his career, because he's going into his junior season. His body has gotten bigger and stronger and thicker. He's better able to handle it. I think he's going to be a very good blocker because he's a willing teammate there. That's an important aspect of this, especially in this system. He's going to have to really want to be exemplary in the receiver blocking aspect of what he's being asked to do, because obviously that's the only way you're going to get the football in the air. Gus has said that, is if you do the things that you have to in the running game, because you have the wrinkles off of it. And he has said the right things when been asked about it. So I'm excited for Deuce, because I think he's the kind of player that the fan base is going to love to watch play.
Yeah, I agree. And look, on background here of how he said yes to Florida State out of the transfer portal, now that he's here, it's something we can talk about because we had inside information because of the unique nature of the situation. The pitch that he got from Gus Malzahn and Mike Norvell, but Gus specifically about what the offense can do for him, he was blown away by it. That's why he chose Florida State. It wasn't because, there was a homecoming element to it. He wanted to go to the East Coast, check out where dad played. It was about the pitch. And even though this is a run-first offense, Gus was able to effectively communicate that if you're the number one receiver in my offense, you're going to get targets, and you're going to get targets down the field. And then what we heard from camp before he was limited a little bit towards the middle and latter parts of spring camp was that not only is Deuce Robinson very good, and as you would imagine a 6'6" receiver is, which is competing for the football, going up and snatching the football away from defenders, that he actually legitimately can get going down the field. This is somebody who has speed to his game. Not every tall and rangy receiver has that element. This is why he was one of those top flight recruits coming out of high school, was because it's not just about the size profile. There's real athleticism there, and there's a lid lifting element to what he brings with that size. Florida State has other options at receiver that are faster. There's no doubt about that. Mekhi Danzy being the fastest of them all. Squirrel White's a burner. Heck, even Gavin Blackwell has some downfield element to his game. Jalen Lucas. But don't sleep on Deuce Robinson's speed. Don't sleep on Deuce's speed down the field. That's something that they're going to be using this year. It's not just about, RPOs are going to generate good looks for him. If you take one false step as a corner or a safety, he can beat you in a foot race to a spot. So that's why he could be something very special this year, and we hope that he's obviously healthy enough to do that.
Was really productive, was really good in camp before getting a little banged up there late in camp. That was most unfortunate for those of us who got into the one scrimmage. He was not participating in that. But I will say this. I had a chance to ask Mike Norvell about him. Mike obviously also volunteered when he was interviewed post-practices in spring to talk about players that he thought shine. A lot of Mike's post-practice spring conversations were about motivating guys and talking about what's not being done and the need to improve in certain areas. But when he did talk glowingly about certain players, it seems like Deuce stood out in that regard often. He mentioned him several times, talked to people close to the program who were at every one of those practices, and they say that Deuce was everything they'd hoped he'd be. He came in right away, selfless, hardworking, talented, explosive, physical. Every aspect of his game was in place already in the spring.
Correct, as advertised, and it's setting up as good as it possibly can when you get a player like this. Now it needs to go cash in. You need to have some success to make sure that the locker room goes along for the ride. But if you're talking about somebody who sets and leads by example, I know, again, people could say we're biased because we have a relationship with Dominic, and I've been doing videos with Dominic now for a few years. But I'm telling you, the way that dad coaches all the athletes he works with, because he's a high school coach. He also has a performance academy where he works with elite athletes on the West Coast out in Arizona. It's about selflessness. It's about doing the little things like making sure you do block on the perimeter. Like the values that you heard. Remember when there were videos about Johnny Wilson before he emerged, and we had that conversation.
Good point.
If you like Kelvin Benjamin, you're going to love what Johnny Wilson brings to the table. Well, there hadn't been a better blocker in the last 20 years at Florida State or 15 years at Florida State than what Johnny Wilson was. I mean, that guy was a menace on the perimeter. So I fully expect to see all of those little things add together. And what I can also tell you is, again, from just having a little bit of inside knowledge, is that Javon Boggs is around Deuce Robinson a lot. The younger receivers who want to make a dent at this level are around Deuce, even though he hasn't proven it the way that Squirrel White has with production and track record. He's got that aura about him, and he also allows for that that leadership element where the receiver room, there's no doubt who's at the top of the pecking order in terms of setting the tone and making sure that those things culture-wise that we were missing out on last year are being done. Deuce has been that since the beginning. Now, you need to go out there, be healthy, produce, and have some success. But if you're just talking about setting the table, this player has done that for Florida State.
It's an important aspect that we don't talk about, I think, enough, partly because it can sound cliche, partly because it gets old because I think the term leadership is overused in general. I talk about if you're a good player and you go out and you perform well and you show up every day, in a way, I guess you could say that's leadership. It can be nebulous. We talk a lot about what is a tangible leadership quality. What is it to be a leader? But I think if you were going to try to tab any aspect of your program with a good representation and future indoctrination, it would be, do your receivers block in the run game? Do your receivers block for each other with the bubbles and all the short underneath stuff that you do? Do they sacrifice themselves for the greater glory and success of that play or teammate? Are they the kind of player that does it each and every time? That was why Johnny Wilson, who really physically had some gifts that you can't teach, right? He was that size. He had that speed at that size. He was a guy that if in a jump ball situation against a 6'1 corner, he had a huge advantage against. So there are the physical tools that you have to have. And obviously, Deuce Robinson has that. He's 6'6", 220 plus pounds. He's got the physical tools. But the willingness to block and the effort that you give in that situation shows up on film time and again. And if you are not willing to do that, you ought not get on the field. It has to be the biggest lesson that Mike Norvell and his staff learned from a year ago, which is that if guys aren't willing to do these things that we're saying Deuce Robinson is going to do, and we know that he will, and he did already in spring, then therefore you cannot play. It has to be accountability. This is a player that sets the stage and sets the tone for accountability, even though he's never taken a snap in the garnet and gold.
Yeah, and I think also the dynamic of how Gus Malzahn runs an offense is important to discuss here, which we've touched on it already. But at the top of the depth chart, those guys play, and they play, and they play. It's not like last year and the year before where there's rotation. They kept their studs out there a lot in 2023. But there was still an awful lot of rotation where you're saying, well, why are our best players not on the field in key moments?
Yes.
And last year, it was like hockey line changes where you don't even have a first line, and all your guys are skating in even 15 minutes apiece. And you're like, what the hell? Why are we not 26 minutes for my best player? In football, that's, hey, man, if we're running 80 snaps, I need you to be out there for 65 or 70 of them. Well, Gus believes that. And so for Deuce, again, I think this year it's more important to put a receiver like him or Squirrel White near the top, because if Gus determines that you're the best receiver or the best running back, you're the one who gets the touches. You're the one who gets the snap count. There is not a rotation like we've seen the last couple of years. And that's only going to serve, I think, to Deuce's benefit when we're talking about bottom line production, targets, receptions, yards, and touchdowns.
People have asked about the frustrations that they sometimes hear in my voice regarding some of the personnel decisions we've made and the decision to go to a Gus Malzahn offense. And that's true. There are aspects of it I don't like, or that I'm not enamored with, or that I wonder whether or not they can succeed based on the personnel. But the one area that I do love it is I don't think there's any doubt they're going to be physical in the run game, and this is a player that is going to set the tone. I think Deuce Robinson, as I said, I had him at number 2. I almost put him at number 1. I just can't put a receiver at number 1. But if you think about what he is, and there are other members of this offense that are skill position players, you're talking about the tight end, you're talking about other wide receivers that will block. It changes the culture of who you are. Deuce Robinson, our number 3 player on the Warchant Top 40. Number 2 is Darrell Jackson. And this is an interesting one. Darrell Jackson comes in at number 2. This is a lot about potential yet again. This is a guy who we've spent a lot of time talking about in his time at Florida State, but he has not been the player yet that his body suggests he should be, Tom. He comes in at number 2 based on what potentially he could be. I think it's of vital importance that he be that for Terrence Knighton this year, because this is the guy whose body type suggests he could be an NFL first or second round type defensive tackle. He's one of the few guys they have like this so far. 32 tackles, was an all ACC honorable mention. 4 tackles for loss, 3.5 sacks. He was the second highest graded player on Pro Football Focus for Florida State in 2024. To go along with those numbers, he was only behind Isaiah Thomas, who was very good. Didn't get a chance to make a ton of plays, but they got to have him be a dominant player. Tony White's defense is something that intrigues all of us, but they have raved already about Darrell Jackson and the way that he competed in the spring. Let's hope this is truly a guy who emerges and understands what's at stake this year. a key cog for the defense and a chance in a money year to go out and make a ton of plays and be a disruptive force on this defensive line for Florida State, because frankly, he is the most equipped to do so, and that's why he comes in at number 2 on our list of top 40 players for Warchant.
Yeah, again, this is somebody I had very high up because of the trenches. He was 4th on my list. I had a couple of other trench players in front of him on, Gunnar Hansen and James Williams. But you could easily make the case that Darrell Jackson should have been ahead of both of those guys because maybe you don't have as many options in terms of game breaker potential behind Darrell Jackson. And so for me, this is a player who the moment he decided to come back and deviate from the path of Josh Farmer. I know they went to different colleges out the gate when they left high school, and one came to Florida State and the other went down to Miami. But it seemed like they were inseparable once they reunited in Tallahassee. And so to see Darrell break away was sign number 1 that I thought he was going to take a step forward this year. The potential has always been there. When he was erroneously ruled ineligible 2 years ago by the NCAA, and then they had the whoops, everybody could play now in December. There were moments where that offensive line that was good, and that was true. The 23 offensive line was good, was dominated in practice by Darrell Jackson. It's all about that potential coming to fruition and coming to reality. But I do like the whispers I've heard behind the scenes in terms of him being more of a veteran leader type. You don't have to be the guy, but you have to be one of the guys if you've been around here this long. That's one of the weird things about the transfer portal is I still kind of look at him as a transfer portal product, but this is year 3 on campus. So it's just like anything else. I mean, like you're one of the stalwarts. You're one of the guys who's familiar with the process, with a lot of the coaching staff at least, familiar with the buildings and the procedures. Darrell Jackson is a critical year for him, and if he is 80% of his potential, he is going to be deserving of a top 5 player on this list. If he's 90% of his potential, he's a top 3 player and maybe the best player on this team.
It's interesting because I just got done in the last video talking about Deuce Robinson and the physical tools that are there, but the leadership that they need as well, and how it's exhibited through the willingness to block and sacrifice when you're not getting the football. This position, by definition, really is an awful lot about sacrifice. It's also about disruption. But for me, hearing Darrell described as mature and as somebody who they could look to as a bit of a leader, well, that was probably the best thing that I could have heard, because I've seen those individual moments of which you speak in which he dominates physically. I've watched him do that to any number of Florida State offensive linemen. We've actually seen him do it in games as well for short stints. So it's in there. It's possible for him to take over games for a short period of time. We need him to be more consistent on that front. But I wasn't as concerned about that because he's in great shape, and he's always had the body, and he's always had the strength and the speed for the size to be that player. It was the maturity that I wanted to hear about this spring. It was whether or not his teammates were looking to him as one of the upperclassmen that they could follow and believe in. It was about whether or not he wanted to accept a role. Farmer not here, you're the guy. Can you be that guy? Because there's no other defensive lineman we're going to talk about before Darrell Jackson. I mean, he's first, foremost. He's the first, second, third guy we talk about on that defensive line. Can you take the mantle, take the responsibility, take all of the burdens that come with that, being the man, and live up to it and carry the day? He was probably somebody, Mike. Well, first of all, let's just say it. He's here. He's here in Charlotte.
Yeah.
This is viewed, for people that don't know, these kinds of invites are viewed as rewards for players. You don't get to come here just because you've played a lot of football. You don't get to come here just because you've been on the team for 3 years or 4 years or 5 years, whatever it is. You only get to come here if you're a player of note, of significance that they're counting on, but also that they can trust. I mean, that's a lot of trust that you have to put in somebody to come and sit before Radio Row here and then go out to the breakout rooms and sit up on the stage and answer all these questions. Are you going to say the right things? Are you going to be selfless? Are you going to be emblematic and a good representative of a Florida State program that needs to take a huge leap forward and get past last year's obvious struggles? And so when they selected Darrell, I thought, another good sign. All right, check. Okay, good. Not only, it wasn't just rhetoric from Mike about the spring. He must have continued to do things over the summer that made them feel comfortable in saying, yeah, Darrell, you go. You're the representative on defense for us. Yeah,
Yeah, one of the pieces of evidence that we got in spring was that James Williams, a transfer, who again he's much like a Deuce Robinson type, or even Gavin Blackwell. There are certain guys that when they get in front of a microphone, you go, "Oh, they take this seriously. Like they haven't arrived. This is a step along the way." Like you can tell, whether it's life or coaching or football, you can tell that they kind of have the perspective. And so when you had the interview, the one-on-one Battles End series interview with James Williams, and he's talking about how he and Darrell caught on very quickly and they work together very well on the field and they have a good rapport and a good relationship. And Darrell helped anchor James into the community here in Tallahassee. Yeah, those are the little signs that you're looking for. Again, he doesn't have to be the one that leads a pregame huddle and be that type of a leader, but he has to be a dependable anchor for this group this year. I mean, literally and figuratively, he has to be that type. The question is, and what's going to be interesting to monitor this football season is, in this scheme with this defensive front and the different responsibilities that you can ask of an interior type player with Tony White's defense, where exactly is he going to line up relative to the football, and how often will he be closer to the center over the football? How many times will he be at that 3 technique? Will he be between a guard and the center? How many times will they actually maybe put him out there to be an edge and a leverage guy, maybe in a passing situation? This is a multiple enough defense that he's not just going to line up in one place and you can set it and forget it. This is going to be a defense that uses athletic linemen in different spots. That doesn't mean that he's going to rush the passer off the edge. It just means that within the defensive interior position group, Darrell might line up in a lot of different places week to week or even within a game.
He's got to be a disruptor. And listen, Tony White's defenses are nothing if they don't stop the run, and he consistently stops the run. 2 games last year where they were woefully bad against the run. We know what those 2 games are because as soon as Tony White was hired, everybody wanted to see what did Nebraska do? Oh, yeah. I remember they had that great game and they shut down Colorado. I remember they had that great game and they shut down Ohio State and that offensive line and that rushing attack. But then you looked at a couple of other games and you went, what was going on against Indiana? What was going on against UCLA? You looked at a few of those things. But by and large, Tony White, wherever he's been, and his mindset and his philosophy and what they seek to do with this defense is predicated on stopping the run. I believe most great defenses are built around stopping the run first. We can get into the nuances of that. But you're going to select Darrell Jackson as your horse against the run. He's 335 pounds and can move and plays with leverage. He's just never done it consistently enough for us to call him a star. But this ranking is indicative, obviously, of somebody we think has a chance to be a star. 6'5", nearly 340 pounds. You see the rankings there. Matt had him at number 1. Tom, you had him at number 4. I had him at number 3. Everybody had him in the top 5. It makes sense that Darrell Jackson is our number 2 player on the Warchant top 40.
That makes a lot of sense. I mean, and again, if you're trying to devise a path for Florida State to score an upset, for example, in one of the 4 marquee games, Alabama, Miami, Clemson, and Florida, it starts with the ability to keep the point total down to 17, 21, 24 probably at most, unless Florida State's playing with great tempo. Then maybe things tick up by a half a possession or so, or a half a score or so. But it would start with making sure that you win first down, and it would make sure that it would be by making sure that you get off the field when you have a chance in a 3rd and 8 or a 3rd and 10. And Darrell Jackson is going to be a part of all of those situations. Sometimes a defensive interior guy, like think Eddie Goldman before he had his breakout year in 2014. There were moments in that Clemson game where he got after the passer, but it was just his presence and his physicality that turned that game on its head. If you recall, there was a pass interference that set the ball at the half-yard line, or was a review on a touchdown. It came back to the half-yard line of the 1.
He jumps off sides.
Right, and you're thinking, like, well, what's the point? They're going to score a touchdown anyway. But it was the center's fear of that large body that led to a wild snap and led to everything that, they came up short of scoring a touchdown on that drive. It's those little hidden plays that an interior guy can bring. Darrell Jackson has that body type. Darrell Jackson can also have 3 or 4 snaps early on in a game that makes a center think twice. or a guard clench up before the snap because they know that this guy's about to bring it on a different level. There's an influence there, and I do applaud us at the Warchant Top 40 because this is kind of a football watcher's pick here. This is a nuance of the game pick. D tackle isn't sexy in the stat book after the game's over. You just said it earlier. This position is about unselfishness. You could have 2 tackles, a tackle for loss, and a half a sack in a game as a defensive tackle. That doesn't look especially great in the final stat book. But if you watch that game, you might say that guy was the best player on the field. That's what the impact could be for Darrell if he lives up to that potential.
To your point, it's funny you were talking about Andre. You talk about Darrell Jackson and the fear factor and the centers and having to deal with these monsters in the interior. Think about Andre Otto when we talked to him and how he's played every position on the offensive line. And I asked him in our interview series for the Battle's End, what was it like when you got time there at center? And he talked about, well, I played some center in high school and I played this and I played that and all this other stuff. And one of the things that he mentioned was being at center. I mean, he didn't love it. He's willing to do it if they need him to do it. But he said, I was proud of myself as I worked in at center because over time I learned to snap the ball without fear of Darrell. He's talking about that moment, and that's what a big dude does. Like, everybody always thinks, well, you should be able to snap a football, and I agree. A lot of times I'm like, why is this so difficult? For years we had difficulties, but it's because of dudes like Darrell. It's not the physical act of snapping. It's that Darrell Jackson's 340-pound self is looming large right across from you, about to wreak havoc, and you got to snap your head up and sink your hips.
Yeah, this is, in short, this is a year where either it's going to end with, and he finally put it all together,
did it.
or he just never could put it all together. It's a big 12 games for him that are coming up this year.